my dears, we have officially reached the season where my face is just red. All the time. We're going to talk about cultural appropriation today because, you know, I'm just a white girl trying to get canceled on YouTube in her first year, so. Yeah, so this originated a few weeks back when I posted on my Instagram story a poll asking if my next a cappella cover should be Mama Who Bore Me from Spring Awakening or a Moana medley, and about 2/3 of the votes were for Moana, but I had qualms because, well, I'm very white, but it led to some great conversations with a handful of lovely people about what you do when your special interests aren't politically correct, and how to appreciate them and info dump about them sensitively, as well as why autistic people tend to appropriate other cultures so much. And now we're here because I thought it was interesting. I am going to acknowledge that talking about cultural appropriation as a white person is not the best of ideas, but I'm going to go at it with a sociological and psychological lens, and we're just gonna roll with it, so I hope that's cool. Oh boy, this is gonna be a video. So, cultural appropriation. It is defined as the unacknowledged or inappropriate adoption of the customs, practices, ideas, etc. of one people or society by members of another, and typically more dominant people or society. So, basically being in a privileged group and taking pieces of culture from a minority group. Typically cultural things that have stigma in our society when a part of the minority group, but then are suddenly hip and fresh and cool and brand new when they're part of the not minority group. I know you know this, we're just recapping so we're all on the same page. So obviously this is harmful because the person in the minority group can't take off their identity at the end of the day. They have to live that way with those social stigmas constantly, while the privileged person in this situation can just try on a culture for fun and then they can just take it off without experiencing any of the struggles or experiences that go along with that identity and the culture that they're borrowing from. And that's just not cute for really anybody involved. Now, what the heck does this have to do with autism, you may ask? Well, we have a tendency to appropriate a lot, like a lot, but not in the way that celebrities steal parts of marginalized identity, like dreadlocks or whatever, to look cool or make a statement. It's typically because a culture becomes our special interest and we want to be a part of it, so then we pick up pieces of it or we talk about it all the time, and sometimes we accidentally talk over the people of that actual identity because we just get so excited. The intent is good, the intent is appreciation, but intent does not equal impact. So let's examine what this can look like. AKA, I'm totally about to call myself out, but you know what? It's best to talk from the I perspective. So, yeah, maybe this will help us to understand blurred lines better. I don't know. So the summer before 10th grade, somebody dared me to learn a language fluently in a year, and I, for some reason, said yes. But I knew that I was, and still am, very, very bad at remembering to conjugate things, so I decided to learn American Sign Language, because I thought there's no conjugation. There is, it's just different. But anyway, I now typically tell people that I learned it because I wanted to understand body language better. That was just a byproduct of actually learning a language. It's a joke. So, glad we got that covered. But as you learn a new language, it's important to learn the culture behind the language because frankly, knowing the culture will get you so much farther than memorizing lists of vocabulary. As somebody who has studied 7 or 8 languages and speaks 6, that is the best advice on language learning that I can possibly give you. Go for the culture and the grammar rules before you start memorizing vocabulary. But anyway, I digress. I was learning about American deaf culture, about the history, and I saw how the history directly affected the way communication works in ASL, and I was just fascinated. I mean, a community of people who technically have a disability but don't identify it as such, and they've made their own culture where that isn't disabling at all, and like that's so cool. Not only that, but as somebody with serious auditory processing issues, this was the first language and culture that was fully accessible to me. Also, the history is super interesting and I wish that we studied it in school, and I could info dump about this for a while, but basically I fell in love with the language, with the culture that I was learning about, every single piece of it. And I thought that everybody deserved to know these things because it was important knowledge and it changed my outlook on the world. And so I organized an independent study for the whole year, and then I gave a 90-minute presentation about it. I ranted about the cochlear implant debate, and I watched all of Marlee Matlin's films. And with my energy and willingness to educate, I genuinely taught people in my school about accessibility for the first time, and I genuinely started change that nobody had seen there before. But now here's the moment where I pause because, yeah, cool, awesome, but like who the heck am I, a random hearing person who has no connection to the deaf community, to represent them? I mean, on one level, my school was so wholly inaccessible that they didn't really have an opportunity to come and make that change themselves, and my intentions and the impact were good, but then Again, it just feels a little off, don't you think? And I've heard stories like this from so many other white autistic people with a certain Native American tribe, or with racism, or Black history, or the Bollywood industry. Like, it's crazy, crazy common, and on some level, we're all raising awareness about these things, and that's cool, but on another level, it's not our place to do that. So why do we do that? Well, from what I've been able to figure out after talking to, again, several people, it's the idea of fitting in. Autistic people spend every single day feeling like we don't quite belong in the world that we live in. We've studied the people around us, and we hope that that will give us some sort of clue how to unlock the social code that'll finally make us feel like we're part of something. And eventually, it gets kind of hopeless. But we have that energy, we have that desire to study people and to learn how they work, so we often end up as psychologists and sociologists and historians and anthropologists, all of that. And so we learn the rules of a culture. We think that we've studied this one enough from a distance that if we were just dropped in, we'd feel at home for once. And we tend to pick minority cultures because we know what it's like to feel left out and unwelcome. We know that narrative. That culture that we pick is just like us in that way. And we think that since this culture and community is just like us, that it would be somewhere that we could feel like we were actually part of the community and we wouldn't have to be so stressed and confused all of the time. And I'll be honest, there was some time there where I very much wished that somehow I would just become deaf so I could be a part of the community, just so I could feel like I fit in somewhere. And then I worked at a school for the deaf for a few weeks, and I discovered that autism doesn't magically go away in a new culture. No matter how hard you research every piece, you're still gonna make social blunders, you're still gonna feel anxious, you're still gonna feel awkward in conversations. And look, I loved my time there, don't get me wrong, and I still love every piece of ASL and deaf culture and all of that, but I realized that what I'd been idolizing, what I'd been glorifying wasn't necessarily the culture. Like, I do prefer it to hearing culture simply because it's more accessible for me, but I was idolizing the idea that I would perfectly and seamlessly fit in somewhere and not feel autistic. And I never thought to myself in the moment, yeah, I don't want to be autistic anymore. I just simply thought that maybe if I started over in a new culture, the hard parts of autism would disappear. And they didn't, because like that's not how that works. So I don't think we're glorifying a culture for clout. We're doing it because we want to feel like somewhere we fit in. And you know where I finally found it? The autism community. That's the only place where I've ever fully felt at home. I mean, I will always be interested in other cultures. I will always love so many elements of them, but I've realized that every single one of them has their flaws just as much as the culture that I'm in right now. And every single one of them, with the exception of the neurodivergent community, is going to come with social anxiety and not fitting in, because that's just how I'm wired. I don't really have a thesis to this because like it's a super blurry line, but if your depth of interest and excitement in something can make a positive change and you're doing that with a special interest level of knowledge, I can't be too mad at that, but at the same time it's important to acknowledge your privilege and try your very, very hardest to give somebody in the minority the chance to do that change instead. You can support them, but they should be leading it. And in regards to appreciation and all other things, just be aware of how it may be perceived. You may have the very best intentions, but it may impact others in such a way that it causes damage, and be willing to accept the consequences of that. And for those of you who are looking at an autistic person who's appropriating something, we may genuinely have no idea, and the idea that we could potentially be hurting others would absolutely break our hearts. So just kindly let us know so that we can be more sensitive to those around us. Especially if we keep accidentally info dumping over the person with the lived experience. Yeah, be kind and accept that we'll make mistakes because we are all human and that it's okay. It's how we handle those errors that matters more. Anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you for learning. Please don't cancel me. And remember, your story isn't over. It has only just begun. I look forward to seeing you in the next one, my dears.